So we want to use Houseboy by Ferdinand Oyono as a text that positions itself as a counter discourse to colonialism. The counter discourse to colonialism. A text that forms a counter discourse to the colonialist discourse. This colonialist discourse is found in Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, where a character like Mr. Kurtz would say that, within his report, say that white people should appear to black people as gods, that black people should worship white people. It's the same colonialist discourse that we have in Joyce Carey's Mr. Johnson, which depicts Nigerians represented by the eponymous hero, Mr. Johnson, as liars, thieves, loafers, among other anti-heroic attributes. You must understand that a character like Mr. Johnson is an anti-hero. He is the hero of the novel, which is why the novel is actually modernist. Actually a modernist novel. He's the hero of the novel, but he does not have the attributes of the conventional hero. When you examine Mr. Johnson's character, you see that he does not have anything that he believes in. He does not have a firm opinion about anything. All that he knows is based on what the white man tells him. He has been brainwashed through colonial education. He even sings that England is his country in the text. He worships the European and looks down on other Africans. In fact, Achebe confirmed that he wrote Things Fall Apart as a reaction to how Africans or Nigerians are portrayed in Mr. Johnson. So a text like Things Fall Apart forms a counter-colonialist discourse to the discourse in Heart of Darkness and Mr. Johnson. And you could see that in the depiction of characters like Okonkwo, when paired with Mr. Johnson, forms a foil, because Mr. Johnson is all that Okonkwo is not. Okonkwo has conventional heroic characteristics, whereas Mr. Johnson is anti-heroic. Mr. Johnson is a modern-day Unaka. So, but we really want to talk about Things Fall Apart today. We want to talk about Houseboy by Ferdinand Oyono. I have notes on my website that I wrote on Houseboy. So if you Google houseboy, my notes should be among the first 10 in Google's ranking. The text was published in 1956. Houseboy was published in 1956 by Ferdinand Oyono. Ferdinand Oyono is from Cameroon. Now Oyono is from Cameroon. He's a writer, he's a diplomat. He lived between 1929 and 2010. The note is currently ranked fourth on Google search. Ferdinand Oyono lived between 1929 and 2010. And you know that the major colonialist for Cameroon was France. The major colonizers of Cameroon was France, while the British colonized the space that we call Nigeria today. The French colonized the Cameroon, which explains why the official language is French. And it also explains why Houseboy was originally written in French. Because Achachebe says, at the point of writing, the colonized writer does not have any other thing to use to express himself other than the imposed language of the colonialist. Because he's not good, he's not sound in his native language. Doesn't know the idioms of his native language. The only one that is capable of using is the language of the outsider, and so he has to use it. So it was originally published in French in 1956. The novel interrogates the Francophone experience of colonialism, which was unique in the sense that it was different from how the British ran their colonies. Unique in the sense that it was different from how the British ran their colonies. While the British used indirect rule, the French had the assimilation policy. The assimilation policy intended to turn black people into French people. The assimilation policy intended to turn black people into French people, assimilate them into the French culture. Because after all, the Africans were assumed not to have their own culture by European standards of what they meant by culture. The Africans were cultureless. Okay? In ideology, in words, in documentation, the assimilation policies sounded good. but it fell short upon implementation. At the point of implementation, it fell short. It is just like every human thing. It is very good when it is spoken about. It is ideal when it is spoken about. All right? It's like all human things. Very beautiful in speech, but at the point of actual practice, it falls short. That means in words it is ideal, in practice, in reality, it's frail, it's weak, it's full of fault, full of it's not perfect. So while the assimilation policy promised to make black people have equal opportunities with French people, with the French, in actual practice, this was not so. All that they wanted to do was to make black people to leave that, to abandon their culture and imbibe the French culture. After that, nothing in the lives of Africans resemble the lives of the Europeans. And this is what is documented in Houseboy. All right? Because the title of the text itself is significant. The title of the text itself is significant. Because in relation to the Europeans, the Africans are houseboys. In relation to the Europeans, the Africans are houseboys. So the text, houseboys, dramatizes to us the failings of the French colonial policy of assimilation. So it is seen that irony characterizes the relationship between Africans and Europeans in Francophone Africa. And by Francophone Africa, we are taking note of the setting of the novel, right? So the subject matter of the novel is the irony and the hypocrisy of the French assimilation policy. The novel shows how the policy fails, using the character of Tunde. Using the character of Tunde. Toundi. It could be an indigenous name. There might be a way of pronouncing it other than what I'm saying, but I think it's Tunde. And we know the failure of this assimilation policy because of the experiences of Tunde living with a white man, or his experiences living with white men, because his experiences cut across the two spheres, the two worlds of the colonial experience, or the two worlds of the colonizers, one religious and the other administrative. The ones who came with the Bible and the ones who came with the gun. Tunde is able to live with the two of them, okay, in representative capacities. He experiences this world in the church, and when he goes to live with the commandant. He goes to live with the commandant after the death of the Reverend Father. Reverend Father, Father Gilbert. The novel is set in Africa during colonial times. The novel is set in Africa during colonial times. It opens in a place called Akomo. The novel is set in Africa during colonial times. It opens in a place called Akomo, which is a village in Spanish Guinea. Of course, when we get to the plot, we realize that the beginning of the novel is actually its ending. At this point, when the novel opens, Tunde is dying, but he leaves behind the diary that he has been keeping in exercise books. And it is through this exercise book that he has left behind that we use to read the counter-colonial discourse that forms this novel, Houseboy. And it is interesting that Tunde has to learn the written tradition simply by living with the white man, because he sees Father Gilbert keeping diary, and he also follows suit. Because it is the white people who brought the written tradition. Our tradition was the oral tradition. We passed on our knowledge from generation to generation through the words of mouth. But the Europeans brought the written tradition. And when Tunde lives with Father Gilbert, he learns the written tradition from him, because he tries to be like him, mimics him, all right? And also learns to keep diary. But incidentally, by innocently documenting his experiences in that diary, he doesn't know that he's documenting a counter-colonialist discourse for us to learn from. Because you see, he's a naive narrator to some extent. Sunday is a naive narrator, because somehow he tells the story against himself. And it's only us, the reader, who know that he's telling the story against himself, except to some point when he begins to realize, that he's a dynamic character. He begins naive and stupid, but at a point, of course, when it is too late, only when it is too late that he begins to realize that he has made a mistake. And you can see how the tone of the diary changes towards the end of the novel. Okay? Most of the events in the novel occur in Dangan, but this final scene in the Spanish Guinea is where Tunde has run to escape dying in the hands of his enemies, who are the colonial masters. All right? He wants to die in a freer space, not to die in the hands of his enemies for them to mock him. So Dangan is a village in colonial Cameroon. Dangan is a village in colonial Cameroon. And as I said, the Cameroon was colonized by France. Tunde is the central character in this novel. He's from a place called Zama, from a village called Zama. which is also a stripe. Look at this, the plot. The novel has a non-chronological plot structure. The novel has a non-chronological plot structure. It begins at the end. The novel begins at the end. The beginning of the novel is the end of the novel. When the novel opens, we see our protagonist, Tunde, at the point of death. He's dying. But before he dies, he bequeaths to us a diary. Bequeaths. Bequeaths to us a diary. In this diary, he has documented his experiences with the colonial masters, with the white colonial masters. It is the contents of this diary that forms the content of Houseboy, the novel that we are reading. Okay? Which shows in a way how important the written tradition is, because it serves, as I said before, it serves as a counter discourse to whatever Father Gilbert and the commandant will have said about Tunde. Sunday is simply telling them, you've told your own part of the story, this is my own part of the story. Okay? So we are looking at a clash of discourses. Of course, we are using it now to counteract whatever the colonial masters would have told about us in texts like Mr. Johnson and Heart of Darkness. And this is what I call textual resistance, right? Call it textual resistance. So in the age of intellectualism, there's no need to get physical with anybody, all right? In fact, it's even obsolete. I think the most important resistance is textual, to intellectual resistance. And the white people have known this over the years. Okay? You can imagine the harm that they did to Africa just by writing lies about us for over 3 centuries. And till today, most people find it difficult to shake off those lies that have been entrenched in the mindset of the people. And there's nothing you can tell them. It's a written tradition. Okay? So the content of the diary takes us back in time, takes us back to the beginning of Tunde's story. It takes us back to his village, where he is a young child growing up with his parents, raised in the tradition of his people, and he's about to take the rites of adulthood. Because in African culture, the child is initiated into adulthood to continue where his fathers left off. But then fate forces him to go and live with Father Gilbert. Father Gilbert is the white missionary in Dangan. Okay? I think it is because of Tunde's parents' high-handedness, especially the father, that forces him to run away to live with Father Gilbert. And the action, how Father Gilbert gets the young children, is through sugar. All right? He uses sugar to entice them. He will go around, he knows that there are young people that like sweet things. So when he sees them, they will run after him and he will remove lumps of sugar and throws it at them as throwing at chickens. Okay? And then they will fall to it. They will even beat people, others, for the sugar, for a lump of sugar. Probably enjoys how they struggle over the sugar, might even block out people's eyes. So this must have led to a quarrel with a parent, and then Tunde's parents must have beaten him for always leaving the house, causing problems, being greedy, running after a white man. And this time around, he's denied food. He's denied food, and a very delicious meal at that. Denied food is denied food, denied being access to the house, denied access to the house, and he cannot stand this kind of high-handedness. This is not discipline again. This is cruelty. Okay, so he has to run to live with Father Gilbert. So literally, it's the father, it's Tunde's father, that chases the child away through his harsh disciplinary measures. Okay, so fate forces him to go and live with Father Gilbert. There, he experiences colonialism from the perspective of the missionary. And because it has to do with the missionaries, he does not really know. He does not really have, he's still innocent, doesn't really know what happens outside the mission, the walls of the mission. But of course, he notices how Reverend Father Gilbert's assistant maltreats the other Christians who are Africans, who are black. That's Father Vandermeer. He kicks them. They simply think that is like, religious discipline, trying to make them good Christians. Vandermeer kicks them, right? Curses them, controls the offering in the church. But this was not so much as traumatic as what he will experience when he goes to live with the commandant. All right, so he has to go to live with the commandant when Father Gilbert suddenly dies in the hands of the hammer of the whites, right? What kills Father Gilbert? The hammer of the white. Hammer of the whites. Okay? Hammer of the whites. And what is the hammer of the white? Hammer of the white is a metaphor for what? Okay? It's a dangerous tree whose branches can fall off any time. And if you are unlucky to be under that tree at that point, you are as good as dead. So this is what happens to Father Gilbert. He dies a sudden and tragic death. So after Father Gilbert's sudden death, he goes to live with Robert, the commandant, at the European residence in Danga. Commandant's name is Robert. He is a colonialist administrator. He has little or no knowledge of God. So you could see that the colonizers lived in two worlds, one that was religious and one that had little to do with, one that was administrative and economic. They used the religion to cover the faces of the blacks, cover the eyes, seduce their minds, while the administrators did the real work of looting the resources. And some of society is still run like that. Okay? Religion is deployed by the elite to numb the mind of the people, seduce them, whereas while they loot the treasury, and while the masses pray to God, right? Masses pray to God for wealth, for for jobs. They pray for wealth, for jobs. All right. And on Sunday, both the politicians and the masses meet in church, and then they clap and pray to God. On Monday, the politician goes back and loots, and the masses go back home to suffer. All right, and they cannot reconcile reality. They pray to the same God, but one has more knowledge than the other. Okay, and one uses that religion to blind the other of the sources of his wealth, of how he gets to sit in the front row, driving big cars, and while the others live miserable lives. Okay, it's religion. It happened it worked for the colonial masters, and it's still working till today. So Tunda's illusion of working with Gilbert is broken when he works for the commandant. It is with the commandant that his eyes begin to open to the deceit of the colonial project. One, he now realizes that the white man is not superior to the black man. When he was in the church, he thought that white people were superior to black people. But with the commandant, he begins to realize that that is not true. For instance, he finds out that the commandant and all white males in Dangan are uncircumcised. They are not circumcised. And, Tunde is a cultural hybrid. Tunde is a cultural hybrid. Tunde is a cultural hybrid. He was about taking the rights of adulthood in his tradition before fate forced him to go and stay with Father Gilbert. So he is a man who goes about with two world views in his mind. He believes in the African cultural values and combines those beliefs with the church values. And so he's in shock when he realizes that the commandant is not circumcised. That reduces him before his eyes and all the others. So, because for him, in his culture, to be a man is to be what? Is to endure the pain of circumcision. And so if there's any man in this world who has not endured that pain, then he's not a man as far as Tunde is concerned. Okay? We also knew historically that one of the things that made Africans realize that the white people were not superior to them was the Second World War, the fallout of the Second World War, when Africans were drafted to fight in the war. They saw white people dying like flies. And they just wondered, so these people could die? So bullets can touch that, but I thought they were gods. So they're not gods. They even have red blood, like us. So what's the difference? We are even stronger than them. All right? Because they were the ones who carried all the big loads. Where did the white man have the strength to carry any load? So it's the same experience here that Tunde has when he realizes that the commandant is not circumcised. At the European clubs, the Europeans treat the blacks as objects of entertainment. So there was no equality. In the church, you could still say, oh, we are brothers and sisters. Brother Peter, Brother John, Brother Van der Meyer, Brother Gilbert, and it makes it look as if everybody is equal, because everybody is brother. They come to church, and then even His Excellency is called brother. All right? And it looks as if everybody, but once you're out of there, you won't even go close to that person. If you try, you'll see what DSS will do to you. All right? Even in the church, even in the church where they may allow you to come close to them, be sure that someone somewhere is watching. And if you make any false move, you're dead. They are constantly being watched. Okay? In fact, even in churches, some of them you can't get close to them. They make sure everybody waits until they have left. For security purposes, they make sure that they leave first before you, the masses, can even leave your seat. Okay? So this rift between the blacks and white people is deepened when Sunday goes out to the outside world there, living with the commandant. He sees how white people treat black people as nothing, serve as objects of entertainment. The relationship between blacks and Africans in the novel is highly hierarchical. A hierarchical relationship is one between masters and servants. And in this novel, Africans are the servants and the Europeans are the masters. Now, judge that against the French assimilation policy. Judge that against the French assimilation policy, and you will see that it is ironic. It's actually ironic. Because the idea was you come into our culture and we treat you as equal. But that is not true. In practice, that's what we are saying. Now, this would not have been a problem for Tunde. He has survival instincts and strategies. He knows how to pretend to be humble, all right, to serve his master. And so things would have gone well with him, except that the commandant's wife arrived from Paris. She's the most beautiful female European in the whole area, and she's well admired for her kindness and humility, but she has a weakness. All right? The commandant's wife is very beautiful, soft-spoken, kind, at least so it appears to Tunde, but she has a weakness, and the weakness is that she is fickle. She's what? Fickle. All right? She is inconstant. She is promiscuous. And this, again, is what makes Tunde question the superiority of the average European over the African. Because if it has to do with moral virtues, the African person is certain of himself. After all, there are institutions in place in that tradition that to check such things. All right? So that even if you didn't want to be morally upright, the institutions that have been put in place will force you to be. Okay, take for instance being unfaithful to your husband. You know the consequences at the point of childbirth. Okay? Where you will not be able to deliver until you confess each and every one. All right? You have to confess one by one. Most matters, most arguments were settled with oaths, right? In traditional African society. Okay? Maybe something went missing and someone suspects you. All you need to say, bring me the oath. I will take it and clear my name. And when the person takes the oath, it's fine. All right? If the person told the truth, we'll find out. If not, we'll still find out. No problem. Okay? So there were things in checking to check excesses in traditional society. But there's nothing like that. In fact, what the Europeans brought was like a free ticket for moral laxity, for people to do whatever they want. That's what the Europeans brought in the name of religion, in the grace dispensation, the dispensation of grace, right? We can do whatever we want because His grace is sufficient, and He will always forgive us when we ask for forgiveness. Okay? And that is why society has not turned out right, even with the fact that everybody has gone to church. Okay? Society has become more wicked than it should have been. So she has an affair with M. Moreau. In the novel, he is the prison director in Dangan. The prison director in Dangan. Okay, so you could see that even in governance, the new politicians are coming in to rule us. What do they swear by? The Bible. And what's the effect? Nothing. After all the looting, after everything, they simply go home and sleep well because they swear by the Bible, right? Imagine if they are sworn by Ogun, or Shango, right? Or Madioha. They won't touch anybody's money. In fact, they will simply take all the money. I don't even want to implicate myself in these things because they know that the justice will be instantaneous. The moment you just stretch your hand to pick public money, then will strike you because you swore. They were saying. So the relationship between Tunde and his masters is ruined when the commandant gets to know about the affair. It shows that Tunde is disloyal because Tunde knows that Emuro usually comes to the house when the commandant is not around and even spends the night. Okay? They even have evidence with the bed sheet that they wash as servants. Okay? They will say, if this thing is true, let us get the bed sheet in the morning. We will prove it. Alright? And true, once they get the bed sheet, the evidence is there. So Tunde and the other servants know, but they have not told the commandant. And so when the commandant finds out through the innuendos of the locals, he's angry. Instead of being angry with his wife, he's angry with Tunde. And they now use Tunde as a scapegoat to resolve their differences, marital problems. They use Tunde to resolve their marital issues. After all, the commandant knows the wife that he has married, that she's unfaithful, she's inconstant. Of course, she did not study in Africa. She started in Paris, France, and has only continued in Africa, what she used to do in Paris. So it is the locals who make innuendoic expressions when the commandant drives by, that he gets to know that his wife has cuckolded him. Wife has what? Cuckolded him. Has cuckolded him. Or cuckolded him. Right? Cuckolded him. His wife has cuckolded him. To cuckold a man is when the wife has an affair with another man. That man has been cuckolded. The man has been cuckolded. Unfortunately, the locals do not know that commandant understands the language. Okay? It's not as if the Europeans would not have spoken a language and developed it. They simply imposed English. They would easily have learned our language and developed it. But that is what colonial arrogance does. simply suppressed the language and imposed English. So Commandant understands the language. And so when the people spoke, they thought they were speaking in the language that the Commandant would not understand. He understands, and that's how he gets to know their faith. Okay? Of course, sometimes when you get to an environment where people think that you don't know the language, just keep quiet. Don't tell them you know the language first, so that you know what they will say about you. All right? Okay? And when they say, don't do like this. Just keep calm. So that they'll say everything. So the problem of Tunde is compounded when Sophie runs away with the money meant to pay workers. The money is custodied by the agric engineer meant to pay workers, and Sophie has a friendship, kind of platonic friendship with Tunde, and that annoys the agric engineer because Sophie is his lover, and he does not want any other black person to lay hands on her. Or even though he treats her like nothing, he wants her to be around only when other Europeans are not there. When the Europeans are there, he treats her like nothing. So when she runs away, they now had to hold Tunde accountable. That they think that Tunde knows where Sophie has run to. Then they come to arrest him in the commandant's house. The commandant then uses the opportunity to sacrifice him so they can restore their marriage. Okay, settle their differences. That's why they easily released. The commandant had the power to tell the police, you cannot arrest my servant. He's under my protection. But through the wife's caprices, they release him to the hands of his enemies. Tunde is arrested and treated like a common criminal. He receives a mortal blow to the chest when a gun butt is used to hit his chest by one of the policemen. And that's how he's going to die. After all, the hospital for Africans don't have efficient services to treat people. And even if it has, if they don't want you to be treated, no, you will not be treated. If they want you to die, they will just leave you there in the hospital. And they won't give you proper treatment until you die. So Tunde knows from the revelations at the hospital that he's going to die. He has been sacrificed by his boss to keep his marriage. Because you see, somehow it's hit on the man's ego if the woman runs away to another man. Okay, so the commandant would like to keep the appearances of the marriage. He still is in control, even though he knows that his wife has insulted him by having an affair with Emuru. Tunde does not want to die in the hands of his enemies. That's why he runs away with his last strength to the Spanish Guinea, where he dies and where we have the beginning of the novel. Where he dies and where we have the beginning of the novel. He dies leaving us the notebook, the size books that contains his story. The story that we read in Houseboy. Houseboy that refers to Tunde. And Tunde who serves Father Gilbert and serves the Commandant Robert. And then the Commandant does what? Betrays him. Betrays him. Because he is expendable. He is expendable. Now, so what really comes out of this story is the unequal and unbalanced relationship between Africans and the Europeans in colonial Cameroons, given the background of the assimilation policies that promised equality to the blacks if they left their culture and imbibed the European culture. Meaning that the blacks were not only betrayed collectively, they were also betrayed individually in the case of Tunde. Tunde could also represent his people. And of course, when he's dying, he remembers the words of his parents who told him about his greed, how his greed will lead him to his destruction. All right? And this greed is seen in going after the white man's ways and his privileges. Want to be like the white person. Okay? And some Africans want to be like white person so that they will look superior to Africans. Because as it's stated in the book, in the novel, the dog of the king is the king of the dogs. The dog of the king is the king of the dogs. So if Tunde represents the commandant, in the eyes of the Africans, he is the commandant. But such a relationship has its own pitfall, because the commandant does not trust you, and to him you are just someone that can be expended with. And that's what happens to him at the end of the day. Point of view. Point of view. Point of view. Houseboy is written from the first person narrative point of view. Houseboy is written from the first person narrative point of view. There are two narrators in this story. There are two narrators in this story. You can compare that to Heart of Darkness. It also has two narrators. There are two narrators in this story. The first narrator is unknown, as is unnamed. The first narrator is unknown, unnamed. He is a guest in the house of a man known as Anton. Known as Anton. A-N-T-O-N. He had slipped away to the village of Akomo in Spanish Guinea to avoid the pressures of serving a white man in Cameroon. So he's going there to rest from the pressures of serving a European master. Just as Tunde runs away from the Cameroon to die in the Spanish Guinea, at a place that that spells freedom for his soul. Because if he's not free as a living being, maybe he should be free when he dies. So in the story, this man is getting ready to leave when a sinister drum roll is interpreted as a sign for the approaching death of a Frenchman in a faraway village called Mfuala. This unnamed narrator is about to leave to go back to serve the European master after releasing stress. When there's a drum roll, in traditional African society, drums communicate a lot of messages. Okay? You can hear, there's one to announce death, there's one to announce sickness, there's one to announce a meeting, there's one to announce danger. Okay? So when you read the novel, take note of how the drum means, because the drum is also used as an object of resistance, even in Tunde's village. So they want to go and see who is ill, because that drum means that a French citizen is about to die. When they get there, they meet Tunde in his last moments. Last moments. Remember, he had received a hit in the chest. The hospital could not treat him here. He knew that he was going to die. He ran away with his last strength, and now he's dying. Among the things that Tunde leaves behind are 2 exercise books in which he has scribbled the significant events during his years of servitude under his European masters. He has served in the church, has served outside the church. So he has full experience to report on the hypocrisy of the French assimilation policy, even though he does so in a naive way. Because somehow, as I said, Tunde is a naive narrator. Then the other narrator is Tunde himself when we begin to see the contents of his diary. So this novel could be read as a fictional diary. A fictional diary. It's a very creative work of art. Because diary is supposed to be non-fiction, but it is fictionalized here. So the art lives after the artist has passed on. The art lives on after the artist has passed on. Maybe Tunde would not have had the opportunity to tell his story if he did not write it down. So what is ironic about this is that Tunde is appropriating, all right, in post-colonial terms. Tunde is appropriating the European tradition, turning it against the European themselves who brought the tradition, right? Tunde is appropriating the written tradition that the Europeans brought to cannibalize the actions in the post-colony. Because he does not write to favor them, he's telling his own story. The story of his servitude, the story of his maltreatment, from the time when he was naive up to the time when his eyes began to open in the commandant's house. Thus, we can say that Tunde's account constitutes a counter-narrative to the hegemonic discourse of French colonialism. Write down that sentence. If you didn't write down any sentence when we started this class, write down this one, right? Tunde's account constitutes a counter-narrative to the hegemonic discourse of French colonialism. So you should learn to tell your own stories. Tunde's account constitutes a counter-narrative to the hegemonic discourse of French colonialism. All right? Tunde's account constitutes a counter-narrative to the hegemonic discourse of French colonialism. Hegemonic. Okay? The hegemonic discourse of French colonialism. Tunde's account can be seen as a small narrative competing with the meta-narrative of Western colonization in Africa. Tunde's story can be seen as a small narrative. The hegemonic discourse infers dominance, story that everybody understands, everybody has heard and believes. Everybody has heard and believed. All right? That's hegemonic. And that's why I'm saying that Tunde's account is what? A small narrative. If you've been taught new historicism, we have come across small narrative, which is usually set against what we call grand narrative. Grand narrative is a hegemonic discourse. And In this context, grand narrative is the colonialist discourse in texts like Heart of Darkness and Mr. Johnson. All right? It's a story that whole world knows and believes that after all, the white people went to Africa to civilize those savages, civilize those primitive people. All right? But the counter narrative is usually a small narrative. Okay? If you don't call it grand narrative, you call it meta narrative. Meta narrative. You don't call it grand narrative, you call it meta narrative. So the small narrative will come in and say, that is not true. By experience, we saw them looting our resources. They didn't really care about us. I don't think it is true also that we did not have culture. We had a tradition. That's a small narrative. It's a small voice. People might just hear and say, well, we don't really believe in that. After all, who is telling the story? One small person like that. Okay? But the big story is there. And the story of the white people about us. And now we are beginning to tell our own stories. So, and our stories constitute the counter-colonialist narrative. Counter-colonialist narrative. Okay? So, and that is how you should read this text. Okay, so let us examine some of the characters in the novel. We have Tunde and Dora. His baptismal name is Joseph. Remember that when the Europeans came, they saw nothing good about us. Even the names our parents gave us was devilish. So if you are coming to Christ, then you have to first of all change your name. Right? You cannot come to Christ without changing your name. Right? You need to bear biblical names, sanctified names. Right? Names that show that you are moved from darkness into light. Okay? And so that's why you have all these wonderful names drawn from the Bible. Okay? So his name is Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus Christ. He is the protagonist of the novel. The protagonist of the novel. He is an example of a modern hero. The modern hero is who? An anti-hero. That's why he's an example of the modern hero. So he's an anti-hero. If he is a protagonist, his antagonists are the white people. His European masters. The commandant and his wife who ganged up against him, despite having served them faithfully. His character is symbolic. He represents all Africans in subordinate positions in relation to white Europeans. He represents all Africans in subordinated positions in relation to white Europeans. He is a dynamic character. He's a dynamic character. He is a round character because he develops in the course of the development of the plot of the story. It's a round character. He's a dynamic character. It's a dynamic character because he changes. It's a round character because he develops mentally. The growth of the growth of the character is usually psychological. The growth of the character is usually psychological. Not necessarily that the character started slim, then becomes plump. No. It is psychological. The changes that we observe in the round character, the dynamic character, is mostly psychological. All right? So he sets out as naive. Naive, sets out as naive. Naive. But then he gains experience towards the end of the novel and understands everything. When as a naive character, he believed in the superiority of the Europeans. He believed in the ideals of Christianity. Then when he gained knowledge and realization, he knew that the colonial masters did not care about Africans, they only cared about themselves. From this point onwards, his actions are subversive. His actions are what? Subversive. Subversive. That means he stays in a subordinate position to resist his white colonial masters. His character is also a force of resistance to the colonial ideology. Tunde in many ways resists the colonial ideology, the colonialist ideology. He does not only expose the hypocrisy of the assimilation policy to us, he also resists them. For instance, in the church, the Europeans are allowed to leave whenever they want to leave. All right? In the church, the Europeans are allowed to leave whenever they want to leave. But the Africans must stay and listen to the sermon. They'll block the door. They'll lock all the doors against the Africans. They must stay and listen to the sermon. Because that sermon that will make them look tame, so that they will not go and fight the white colonial masters while they are looting their lands or all the resources. Okay? So the white people are free to leave at any time. Okay, just like the person will just come to the church and then drop 1 million, tell the pastor that he has a meeting. All right? Somewhere. He has a very important meeting. They pray for him. They tell all of you to pray for him while he leaves. And then you have to stay back after you don't have any money to give. You have to step back and listen to the gospel. All right? So his resistance is also psychological. He later realizes that the white people are hypocritical and he resists them in his mind. Okay? He resists them in his mind. He might serve them with his hands but not with his heart. Okay? And that is the greatest resistance. All right? Once the heart is not there, then the individual is not there. So, no matter how he is kicked by the commandant, he doesn't feel it because he does not have regard or feelings for them. So psychologically, Tunde is superior to the Europeans. He loses respect for his master when he knows that he's not circumcised. He also resists the master by spitting into his glass of water and make sure that he drinks it. All right? But of course, he cannot go physically to go and challenge him. He knows that that's dangerous. He will just die. So all these are simple acts of resistance. Okay? So he spits into the commandant's glass of water and gets him to drink it. And he did this because he demeans Tunde's worth. After he found out that his wife has cuckolded him, when Tunde decides that he wants to die far away from his enemies, it is because he realizes his self-worth, doesn't want his body to be gloated over by his enemies. Enemies must not gloat over his body. Because he even values his corpse. They must not lay their filthy hands on him, even at death. That's how Tunde has valued himself. Okay? So he wants to die far away from them. It is also part of his victory. Also part of his victory. Because probably he would have given them satisfaction to come and see Tunde's corpse. So this dog has finally died. Okay? And the greatest victory that Tunde has over his enemies is textual victory. Everybody said textual victory. Good. And what is that? The diary. The diary. It's a beautiful thing. So he has textual victory by leaving his story behind to be told from generation to generation. And he does this by appropriating the written tradition of the Europeans. Okay? He turns the written tradition of the Europeans against them. They brought the written tradition, but he uses it against them. So that's what we call appropriation in post-colonial terms. So when we read Tunde's story, and then we read whatever accounts that M. Moreau and the commandant's wife and the commandant will leave behind, we will sympathize more with Tunde. Compared to if Tunde did not leave his account behind and then we had to listen to only the account of the commandant, his wife, and M. Moreau. You can imagine what they would say about him. Alright? They would lie about him because it's the European character to lie. Right? So that's why we appreciate him. So because when you put the account together, you see that Tunde is innocent. He's innocent. He was only sacrificed. Alright? He was sacrificed to keep the faulty relationship or faulty marriage. He's innocent because he did not have an affair with Sophie. Tunde is highly moral. He has high moral standards because even when he slept in the same room with Sophie, he resisted her advances. But the engineer thought that Tunde must have slept with Sophie that night because he is with his fellow Europeans and it will not be good for his name and dignity for him to be seen with an African lady, even though he loves her. So he now pushes her away to sleep in another room, and she had to sleep with Tunde that night. But since that night, he has not forgiven the young man because he believes that he has done the deed, but he never did it. So he's innocent, and we are here to justify Tunde as a morally upright person. He did not do it. Tunde did not do it. He's not guilty. You understand? He's not guilty. All right? He did not have an affair with Sophie. Neither did he conspire with her to steal the agri-engineer's money. All right? Sophie steals the agri-engineer's money as a revenge of how he has been treating her, looking down on her and maltreating her, abusing her. So he is innocent. His is just a frame-up that's inspired by racial hatred. It was framed. He was framed. And that is the story. He was framed. All right? After all, he didn't ask the commandant's wife to have an affair. All right? So this is why Tunde is a tragic hero. And these things happen to tragic heroes. Okay? Maybe caused by his naivety. Caused by his naivety. Naivety. Caused by his naivety. Maybe that's his weakness. He's wanting to participate in the European way of life, enticed by sugar. All right? The sugar that began literally in childhood later became metaphoric in adulthood. Okay? Of wanting to be seen highly placed because he's shooting with Europeans. Okay? So in childhood it was the literal sugar, but in adulthood it became a metaphoric sugar. Because the European way of life is usually enticing at the beginning, but it's bitter at the end. And that's what Tunde found out when it was too late for him to turn back. Okay? So his weakness is his naivety in thinking that being subservient will save him from the wrath of a disgraced white race. All right? There's this woman, Calicia, who she had lived with white people and had known their character. She's independent of thought. She's not subservient like Tunde. When these issues came up, she advises Tunde to run away. Tunde wanted to be an obedient servant. If she had listened to her, all this would not have happened. Okay? She advised Tunde that his masters would destroy him to save that shame. But Tunde did not believe. He thinks that being subservient to them, continue to serve them, would make them like him. But that's not true. Let's talk about Tunde's parent. There are minor characters in the novel, as well as Tunde's uncle. We know Tunde's father sets traps for porcupines. We also know that he is harsh in his disciplinary measures like most African parents. He's very harsh towards Tunde. It is his high-handedness that forces Tunde to go and live with Father Gilbert. The reason is that Tunde refuses to submit himself for punishment. Okay? After his sugar hunting expedition led to a quarrel between the parents and other parents, the boy's name is Tinati. Tinati's parents had to quarrel with Tunde's parents over Father Gilbert's sugar. So the white man usually has a way of dividing the community. It happens when things fall apart. Okay? They make the community to divide and fight against one another. And that's exactly what happens even till today. When the Catholics are fighting against the Protestants, and so on and so forth. It's colonialism, dividing societies, divide and rule. Weaken them through division, and then you rule over them. All right? This religious sect does not buy from this religious sect. They don't move on the same path. Any day that they move on the same path, there's going to be fight. All right? Because instead of just walking past each other respectfully, this ones that are going to hell because they are not wearing things on their head. They're going to hell. And then the other one will also say, "Are you talking to me?" And then before you know it, they will fight. So you advise not to move on the same path. So that if one sees this one on this side, one crosses to walk on the other side. All right? There's no unity in such a society. Okay? So he chases Tunde out of the house for refusing to submit himself for punishment. And what really pains Tunde more is when he's unable to join in the porcupine meal. And this probably is the best porcupine his father has ever caught. He just watches from the window how they're eating it without him. In fact, at the point his father says they should go and bring Tunde share. That since he has not brought himself to be punished, that he will not eat Eh? And so that because of that, Tunde says this man doesn't like me. At least Father Gilbert will not treat me like this. And of course, when he goes to Gilbert's house, he's given the remains of his food, right? Not the main food, but the remains. What has been left over, given to him. Okay. So, but he's happy to be a servant in another man's house than to inherit his father's tradition. So that's how he leaves home, and that's how he lives the way of his people, the culture of his people. So his characterization is symbolic because it talks about how Africans abandon their culture. Sunday was at the point of taking over the family tradition when he enters manhood. But just as when he is about to do this incident happens and he had to abandon his culture to imbibe the European culture. Probably it must have been in promised equality. Father Gilbert must have told him that when you are in the Lord, we are all brothers and sisters. Nobody is above the other. All right? Without knowing that all brothers and sisters are equal, but some are more equal than others. Okay? Okay? So, Father Gilbert, he is the first European master that Tunde has when he leaves home. Tunde is very grateful to Gilbert because he took him in when he had nowhere to go. He is the one who teaches Tunde all he knows in life, including reading and writing. This was the only thing that the Europeans brought to us, reading and writing. The art of reading and writing, which is good in the end because Tunde uses it against them. All right, uses the written tradition against them, just like Chinachebe and the others have used it against the colonial masters. Okay, by cannibalizing them in their writing. So Gilbert is very proud of Tunde because he represents the success of the colonial project. The success of the colonial project, even on the surface, was to civilize the natives. The hidden motive was to steal the resources, but the surface reason was to civilize the natives. Okay, so now whenever he goes, he will show Tunde around. He can now read and write. You can say that he can now read and write. I taught him myself. Okay, so colonialism has succeeded. We have succeeded with what we came to do in Africa. Okay, so just as it's also discovered in this by one of the Europeans in Dangan that if black children, African children, are given the same opportunities as the French, they can do the same. They can perform at the same level or even better than French children. The only thing is that in the colonial Africa, African students do not attend the same schools with French students. Do not have the same facilities. Do not have the same support. Okay. So the relationship between Gilbert and Tunde is one of master and slave. For instance, on the first night, Father Gilbert gives Tunde the leftovers of his dinner. He's also seen kicking him in the sacristy. Tunde likes his master, so he likes imitating him. He wants to be like him. So when he finds Tunde imitating him, he kicks him. All right? And this was how most of these Reverend Fathers treated Africans. Maybe they thought it was part of the disciplinary measures, but they like to, maybe sometimes they will cane them and then they will kick them. All right? As a way of instilling discipline in the brutes. All right? Because you were brutes. Or they saw us as brutes. So we need to use cane. That's why today people don't allow canes to be used in schools again. because it is probably used for cows. Except that still people that you give command or instruction, they don't behave, they don't respond to until it's applied. You understand? But it's not supposed to be so. So that's why beating or caning has been outlawed. He gives his old clothes to Tundi. He gives his old clothes to Tundi, and I can imagine how he looks in those clothes. Okay? He must be quite funny in there because the clothes will not fit him. This clothes will not fit him. So it makes him have a funny appearance in Father Gilbert's clothes, and that is also symbolic. All right? Because it's like it is you become a cultural misfit if you imbibe the culture of the Europeans when you are an African. You might not be able to practice it well. So most of the events in the novel are symbols. Okay? So by giving him his old clothes that do not fit him, it shows how Africans are unsuccessfully trying to imitate European culture. This is how we interpret literature. Okay? We make it have more meaning. Father Gilbert is the chief priest in charge of St. Peter's Catholic Mission at Dangan. Okay? He's well respected and loved by his followers. Unfortunately, he suddenly dies when he is struck by the hammer of the whites. Okay? It's a branch of a huge cotton tree. Huge cotton tree. Hammer of the whites is a branch of a huge cotton tree. Cotton tree. He dies suddenly when he's struck by the hammer of the whites. And this sudden death is what will make Tunde to go and serve the commandant. Okay? Father Vandermeer. He's an assistant to Gilbert. He's noted for his cursing habits and crude manners, especially his cruelty to Africans. He abuses Africans and kicks them in the church. Vandermeer does not trust Tundi. He sees him as one who can take the church money. He humiliates him, and he also humiliates other Africans in the church. He does not trust Tunde or any African around the church money. He gives corporal punishment to the Africans for misbehaving. He's very interested in the offering box, which is illustrative of the economic interest of the colonial masters in Africa. Okay? So the offering box also shows the exploitative nature of Christianity. Because we see the Christian bring their chickens to Father Gilbert and all sorts of gifts. Okay? So this has continued till today. This exploitation has continued till today. It's even worse now. The way people are exploited in the churches. Then we look at the commandant. The commandant is the principal character in the novel. He's the chief of the Europeans in Dangan province. He stays at the colonial residence in Dangan. This is where Tunde goes to work after the demise of Father Gilbert. Father Gilbert is now considered a martyr because he died in Africa doing missionary work. So the commandant exerts its superiority over Tunde in many ways. mostly through humiliating words and abusive physical acts. He also stereotypes Tundi by suspecting him to be a thief even before getting to know the young man. That's seen during the interview. He asked him, "Are you a thief?" All right. But with time, he begins to trust Tundi until the incident that involves his wife's infidelity with M. Moreau, the prison director. Then M. Moreau himself is the prison director in Dangan. He has a wife, but he manages to worm his way into the heart of the commandant's wife. He visits the house a number of times when the commandant is away on tour. And the rest is history. The servants, the cook, the sentry, and Baklu, the laundryman, had to put pieces of information together to understand the tragedy that was unfolding before them. We even see how M. Moreau visits the commandant's wife with his own wife, May Moreau. May Moreau. Maybe the wife even knows about the husband's attitude. This affair strains the relation between Tunde and his masters. And when the Sophie affair comes up, M. Moreau sees it as an opportunity to get back at Tunde. So it's a plot among the Europeans against Tunde himself. So Tunde is being scapegoated by the Europeans for the crimes that they themselves committed. So at the end of the novel, we see that the commandant gets back to be on good terms with his wife after sacrificing Tunde. So the sacrifice was necessary to renew the infidelity-filled relationship. We don't believe that the commandant will avenge the humiliation that Emiro has done to him. After all, he used to it because the wife has done this over and over again, not even in Africa, but in Paris, and he has done nothing about it. Let's look at the character of Sophie. So you might want to ask why we have a prison director in colonial Africa, and who were the people in the prison. Should we answer the question, or should we move on? All right, let's look at Sophie. Sophie is a young black woman whose beauty is apparent to everyone. She's a mistress to the agricultural engineer. But she's unhappy in the relationship because she's treated as an object of pleasure and only called upon when the engineer needs to be pleased. The engineer does not want her around when his European friends visit. Thus, the relationship exists only in secrecy. So Sophie is deeply hurt when the engineer asked her to take the back seat in the vehicle and act as a maid, a cook, during a tour with the commandant, so as to not let the other Europeans know. So Sophie now plots stealing from the engineer to hurt him, and he runs away to Spanish Guinea with the prize. She regrets missing the opportunity to carry out the act on the day of the tour. She tells all of this to Tunde, who is not interested in her nor in her ideas. She's upset and surprised that Tunde could stay in the same house with her overnight, but does not touch her. She wonders if he is a man. Then we have M. Janopoulos. M. Janopoulos. M. Janopoulos. It's you here. This is the white man who runs the European club in Dangan. He runs the European club in Dangan. He is said to have been the only European who survived the cannibalism of the natives many years back, shortly before the First World War. He is also the wealthiest of all the Europeans in Dangan. M. Giannopoulos does not like black people, which explains why he always sets his dog on them for his own pleasure. He's a minor and flat character in the novel. So what we note about him is hatred for black people. He represents the force of hatred for black people, but he always sets his dog on them. And when the dog chases the Africans, he takes pleasure in it. It's a form of entertainment for him. Then we have Andor. And Andor is a drummer. Andor is a drummer. He shares the same surname as Tunde. He's a drummer is a drummer employed by the aggregate engineer as a traditional timekeeper for the community. But he also operates the drum to send out subversive messages in the course of marking the time. So that's why I was talking about using drums as a force of resistance in the novel. That's what he does. He uses his drum to communicate other messages to the black people. Sometimes when red is coming, he will use the drum to communicate so that they will go and hide, so that they will not be caught by the Europeans. Like Tunde, Andor is a subtle force of colonial resistance in the novel. So when you read the novel, you pay attention to his character. Then we have Mare Salvin and the husband. They are a European couple, husband and wife, respectively in Dangan. Mare Salvin, M. Salvin is the headmaster of the colonial school in Dangan. In a way, he represents the silent European conscience in the novel. He believes that African children can do this. He believes that African children are not inferior to French children. He is committed to raising Frenchmen out of Africans through the instrumentality of education. So he is the force of the assimilation policy in the novel. Then we have Baklu, the laundryman. Baklu, the laundryman, the sentry, and the cook. They are minor characters. They work for the commandant. They are the ones who know about the affair that Emre has with the commandant's wife. Then let's talk about Gullet. Gullet is very important. Gullet is a white police officer. What is a white police officer? He is the chief of the police. He represents brutality and rascality of the colonial police and security system, especially when it comes to dealing with the natives. He first raided Tunde's residence, where he stays with his sister's husband, shortly after Tunde began working for the commandant. It is later revealed that this raid was on the orders of the commandant as a part of Tunde's background checks. During this visit, Gullet eats the bananas in the house, which is an unprofessional act. The second raid is when Tunde was arrested after Sophie had fled with the engineer's money. Finally, this is talk about the character of Kalicia. Kalicia is the African lady who comes to serve as a chambermaid to the commandant's wife. As a chambermaid. After she feels uncomfortable having Tunde around his bedroom, around her bedroom, because Tunde discovered used condoms under the bed of the woman's bedroom while trying to clear the room of pieces of broken bottle. it would have given away the affair that she was having with the commandant, or sorry, with M. Maroon. Khaleesi is brought by the cook who says that she is the cousin of his sister's brother-in-law. That's how Africans establish relationships. She is educated, speaks and understands French. That's her education. She speaks and understands French. She's also exposed and has served many European masters, with most of these masters falling in love with her because of her beauty. But then she's depicted as a heartbreaker who has refused to settle down with any man. She's full of confidence as she meets the commandant's wife. In fact, compared to the commandant's wife, she's more confident. Khaleesi advises Tunde to leave the residence as there is likely to be a plot against him. If only Tunde has listened. All right, so we pause there for today. We meet again on Tuesday. You can read more by going to the website. Just Google Houseboy. So we'll meet again. We'll take another text. And that should help us talk about post-colonialism.